to the office of Metacore in Helsinki. So it's minus 13 degrees today. I just came from Berlin and it was super cold and it's snowing, but we are in the week of slush. Today we're here to go through the journey and retrospective of Metacore since its founding over in 2020, the past 3 years. And before we begin, I wanted to share maybe a few facts that also what makes Metacore, very exciting, curious company, but also quite impressive. So key facts I wanted to start before, and also with Mika here today as the CEO and co-founder of Metacore. So Metacore was founded in 2020 and known for Merge Mansion, and I think the big game as the Merge game. I remember as well when with my team we were looking into Merge games in 2018-19 at that time. So everyone was exploring how do we crack the puzzle market when it was already saturated and Merge was emerging. And you were among the first companies as well to really grow really fast with Merge Mansion. So today, counting 50 million downloads. And in 2022, 129 million revenues in dollars, and quite impressive and keep growing. And also what we'll talk about today is the journey of the company since you founded in 2020, but now to counting 190 people. And for the facts as well, Metacore has been fully funded by Supercell as well, and with 180 million in funding, and what allows the company to grow as we will talk about through the stages. And maybe it would be actually better that I do ask as well you, Mika, so we have a bit of a conversation here, although I do know a bit of your background. But yeah, how you started, in games, how long have you been in games, where have you been working before? Not even you founded Metacore, because that's a second part of your entrepreneurship journey, but maybe even before you started to be entrepreneur yourself, and I think that's the best way of introducing for our audience, for people who don't know yet, Mika Tammenkoski here.
Yes. I got started in games like way back already in '96. I started working for a company called Remedy Entertainment. And Remedy, of course, nowadays they are really well-known company, about 400 people, the headquarters in Espoo. They just launched Alan Wake 2 to rave reviews. But in '96 the company looked, of course, really different, as did the whole games industry. It was just getting started. My background, like how I got into the games in the first place, I think it's a really typical or stereotypical story for a person of my age to be working in games. So I got excited about games in the early '80s when I was a small boy. And I formed this naive child's dream of wanting to make games when I grow up. And I didn't understand to question that dream. And I was also lucky enough to be employed in the industry early on. Of course, so Remedy was my first job in the industry. I'm a self-taught programmer, so I have a tech background. I thought that I'm ready to be making games, as I think like all of us thought that we were. And I learned that I actually lack quite a bit of experience actually in making games. But that's how I took off in AAA games. Since that, after that, I moved into downloadable mobile games. These were the Java games in Western markets from like 2000, 2001 onwards, when the first mobile phones with downloadable Java games were launched. And I learned a lot, because the games we were making, games were not services yet, they were one of downloads. And also the handsets were really limited in capabilities, so we got to develop many small games. And that was really the kind of school of making games for me. I really learned about the technicalities of making games. And I also learned about the more casual end of the market, the broad audiences. And I felt that my calling is to be making games for these audiences. And that's been kind of like the foundation of my career in games. And that's when I found the direction that I've been on since then.
Mm-hmm. And from your journey at Remedy, and you say also casual, so you touch on other companies through your journey. And can you talk more about that part? So how did you expand your skills as well through your career? And that maybe, so there's one aspect which is the type of game you wanted to make and the impact. And I'm quite curious, from Remedy to more casual, how did that happen? But also, like from my understanding, you've been also with Digital Chocolate at some point. How did that fit into that journey? And what was the connection then later or before you started your first company yourself?
Yeah, I think so when I started my career in games, I think at that stage I was most interested in the craft of making games. So it was not really about even audiences, but just the craft of making games. And I think all of us at Remedy, we were making games for our kinds of audiences. So we were making basically games for ourselves. And then what I learned through mobile was that there are these other audiences that we can be serving as well. And they have different needs. They approach games in a different way to begin with. And that was really eye-opening to me. And even though it sounds so simple, and it really is a simple thing that there is an audience that you might not be part of, but still it was eye-opening to me. And then, so when we founded a company focusing on mobile games, that company was called Sumia. And Sumia was acquired by Digital Chocolate in 2004. That's how I transitioned to working for Digital Chocolate. And so the experience at Sumia where I learned a lot. So we were building the company from ground up. We were looking for investors. We couldn't get an investment. The investment environment looked entirely different back then. And also we were inexperienced. At Digital Chocolate, the fact that it was a US-based company, the headquarters were in San Mateo. They were a VC-backed company. It was headed by Trip Hawkins from EA and 3DO. The years at Digital Chocolate, they were kind of the school. I'm a university dropout. So I didn't ever graduate, but I think the Digital Chocolate era, in many ways, was the school for me. So I learned a lot from those years. And there are still many things that I can apply to today from those days, either in things that we did right or things we did wrong as well.
And in that, it's so funny because I have talked to some of you who have been part of a Digital Chocolate, we say alumni, like that's cool, although it wasn't in school, but it was so early with mobile that, everything you've learned, you took it in other companies. And could you remind me some of maybe the big names that we do know as well are ex at Digital Chocolate? I know Antti Atara was there as well. I don't know if Mishka as well was there at some point.
Yes,
and
at some point.
Ilkka from Supercell.
Yeah, Ilkka from Supercell. He was one of the founders of Sumia. Mikko Kodisö as well from Supercell. Yeah, where Digital Chocolate was one of the first games companies in Finland to grow a bit bigger. And it's been great seeing so many people go on their own career paths since then. It's been really great to see that. Yeah, and there's so many names that I could name. That it's golden times in many ways.
And I'm discovering those names over time, because it's not how usually people would present themselves, like, oh, I'm an ex-Digital Chocolate. But when you ask the questions like, oh, I was as well at Digital Chocolate, that's interesting. It's for us in Berlin with the new scene as well. It's what WUGA is for some of us, we call ourselves a WUGA alumni because we graduated from WUGA, and then we end up building, our new businesses, whether it's supporting games or game studios. So that's quite interesting to see the same, but probably a few years back with what happened in Helsinki. And so after Digital Chocolate, I do know that you also funded first company Every, right?
Yes.
And what happened in between, or was it right away?
No, it was not right away. So after Digital Chocolate, I had an idea that I want to become an investor. and we had an investment company for a bit over a year. We learned that investing is really hard. I learned myself that it's really hard for me to be one distance apart from actually doing. I'm really, at least even today, I feel like I'm more a doer than trying to take one step back. After that, I went on to found a company focusing on HTML5 games. There was the trend of HTML5 games.
I remember.
Yes, I got excited about this new exciting platform HTML5, which was supposed to be removing all the barriers from downloading games. Which in hindsight, I'm the kind of person who gets really easily excited about new things. And I hope that I have now learned my lesson. And then after that, we went to found Everywhere Games. That was to focus on smartwatch games. So again, getting excited about a new platform.
Oh, wow. Okay, so I can see the pattern. And so as it was so I didn't keep track of all the companies that you did found before. So now I start to see the correlation. And what made you transition from a company to another? Did you have to close the HTML5 one? And did you found it at that time with other people or by yourself? And so what happened to that team? Did that team continue, for example, with Everywhere Games? I'm quite curious about, the
Yeah, so that team, so we had, it was just like really small team, and we were focusing on first building HTML5 games, and when that failed, there were many reasons for that, then trying out to expand to more broadly to apps, so like drawing apps and such, which was even harder than making games. And then that basically, we decided to close down that operation, and then after a while then came up the Everywhere Games.
Okay. So what I believe as well, when you close a company, I mean, I have closed studio and also a company previously, it is a bit of a painful process to, face the reality. This is not working and we need to close. And do you remember at that time, what did you take away from closing? How did you feel at that time? Was it more a setback, something negative or something positive, and okay, let's start immediately the next one? So I'm quite curious what led you still then up next, let's build the next company.
Well, I think it is a process, and I think, I don't know, like at least for me, I think it's not the same kind of experience every time. I also went through that when we did a pivot for Everywhere Games. And then I thought that no, actually I have learned something. So I think you always learn something new about yourself, about the environment, about building businesses, about creating teams and so forth. And so when with the HTML5, I think of course it's always sad, it's always hard, it's always a disappointment. But I think that wasn't so hard of a case. I think the pivoting from everywhere so pivoting from smartwatches to mobile was a lot bigger change and a lot bigger shift for me. And maybe some of that was already back in my head, like cooking up somewhere in there. Maybe I'll talk about the pivoting from everywhere from smartwatches to mobile, because I think that was a pivotal moment, so to say. So with Everywhere Games, so me and Haki Järvilehto, we got excited about smartwatches as a games platform. And oftentimes when there is a new platform being born, games are one of the first killer apps on that platform. And that's what we figured is going to be happening also with smartwatch and smartwatch games. And we founded Everywhere Games based on that premise. In December 2014, we incorporated the company. And then in January 2015, we started working on our first game. We launched 4 games altogether over 3 years time period. 3 of those Apple chose as Game of the Year, and we were clearly the most successful smartwatch game developer out there. But still, it said more about the market than about us. So the market was really small. The market really didn't develop at the pace that we thought it would. And by about like early 2018, I found myself in a really frustrating position to be in. So we were thinking about where to go as a company, because we could stay focused on smartwatch games, wait for the market to evolve, or then do a pivot. And me personally, like I said, I'm the kind of person who gets excited about new things. I found myself again in a situation where I had gotten excited about something and then underestimated the time it takes for these things to evolve, if they evolve at all.
Yeah.
And this was for me the first time that I felt really frustrated about this. And the recent experience was about HTML5. And back then I didn't feel that frustrated. But now I saw that I just did this mistake, and now I did it again, right after, one after the other. And I started questioning whether, like being frustrated about myself, I started questioning like whether like the whole decision-making process is the right one. And back then when we were looking at the mobile games market, and because of various reasons, we concluded that the market it's young, but we also concluded that it must be really immature. And I'm the kind of person, so I get excited about new technologies. I also get excited about being an entrepreneur at heart. I get excited about disruptive innovations and blue ocean strategies and all of that. And I oftentimes think about, so what is my way of building a business through disruptive innovation and blue ocean? But then I realized that, and then I really like these hero stories of the entrepreneurs who do things in this way. But then I realized that if the market is immature, and games at large, I believe, is still immature, then for sure the right strategy is not to use disruptive innovation or blue ocean, but most likely it's to jump head on to compete. And then looking at the mobile games market, I realized that actually most likely the wisest thing would have been to just stick to the market, ride the wave of it evolving. And that I had been avoiding competition basically the whole of my life, always getting excited about new things. And this was a really big shift in my thinking. And I feel like there are all these failures that I had to do, and then you learn something eventually. Maybe it's just about having a hard head. But really, I don't think it's not only about one pivotal moment in your life, but it's a continuation of these kind of events that lead you to somewhere.
It's really interesting, and now I can see the pattern where it's true mobile was evolving at the time you talked about the Java, right? I have been part of that era, and it has evolved, if one can say, to what it is today. But it's a tempting also strategy, and it's a valid one, but much more risky to explore new platform and technology. And after some repeats, although it's not the same, of course, you came to a point like questioning your own decision-making process to, well, what if we just go confrontationally, and having that ability to admit to yourself, like, okay, was I avoiding direct competition by exploring others? And if I keep doing this, then yeah, it's very high risk, and the likelihood of success is also lower because it's new technology. So coming to that conclusion must have been quite like back to what you said, you learn about yourself, quite a moment of growth for you, to really question almost that way of working for, I don't know if it was a decade, but many years, to just switch gear and stick to what Everywhere Games was. As I understood as well, you pivoted you started in 2014-15, and it was the foundation of Metacore, right?
Yes.
So it never changed in the end. You didn't build another company.
No.
It just evolved.
Yes.
I'm quite interested in that transition because we see just the tip of the iceberg of suddenly where everyone was paying attention to Metacore, we've much mentioned. But the story, what led to this, is also very interesting to me, like exactly from that pivotal moment. So what were the steps that led to much mention, for example? Maybe there were a cemetery also of prototypes that we have never heard about.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't say a cemetery of prototypes, because we I don't actually believe in prototyping itself that much anymore. It has its place. But the way we got started with the mobile, so we did a pivot in 2018. Back then we were still called Everywhere Games, and we thought that if anything ever comes out of this, then we'll also rebrand the company. But now we stick to that. It was not the highest priority to rebrand it at that stage. And so we realized that the market is most likely immature. We are not really being player focused to begin with. We oftentimes, if you think about, if you go 10, 15 years back, the way we started making games, some companies still do it this way, is that the game team sits down and then they think about what kind of game do we want to be making. And oftentimes then it might be that you're making a game for your kind of audience, or then you might be creating it for some hypothetical audience. But how do you really start from the audience? If you go to mature customer-focused industries, how do they start with the process of creating products? So we thought that we really have to start from the audience to begin with. And we had gotten excited about, so we had a habit back then of playing games as a team. We chose one game, we played it for a week, and then we discussed it. And this was a way for us to expose ourselves to a wide amount of games, but also to learn about these games ourselves, but also learn how the others see these games. It was a great way to educate ourselves. And one of the games we played in fall of 2017 was Merge Dragons. So one of the first more advanced Merge 3 or Merge 5 based games. And we didn't know who is this game for. We actually back then we thought that it's for some mid-core audience. We didn't know better. We didn't have access to any data back then. We got excited about the mechanics, but we thought that there are many areas where we could improve on, and we could implement it in different ways based on the UX and based on the scalability and based on content itself, and Merge taking the centerpiece. And then in early 2018 we did start prototyping, but we actually didn't. We had an idea for the context of the game already based on some of the learnings from Merge Dragons. We wanted to do differently, and we did think around with the mechanics a bit, but then we jumped into implementation, and we did it in a really traditional way to begin with. So we thought that we are targeting mid-core audience. We had really stereotypical mid-core fantasy in the game. We did Merge 2 instead of Merge 3 because of UX reasons. And then because we wanted to start testing, back then we still thought that it's about mechanics. So we built a prototype with the first session in it. We spent about 3 months working on this. So we had a game which could play for about 20 minutes, and you could still continue playing after that. But the game, the experience didn't really hold that well because it was only balanced for the first 20 minutes roughly. And then Playtest Cloud was pretty new service back then. We decided to use Playtest Cloud. So this was our way of testing. So we wanted to get feedback from the audience as early as possible. And we did the test in summer of that year, 2018. And it was a clear failure. We saw that the mid-core audience, especially that we targeted the game towards, they didn't like the game. It was like 2.5 to 3 stars out of 5. And many players didn't understand the mechanics. And you could see clear frustration when they didn't understand how to play the game. We did the test also for casual audience, just out of curiosity. And most of the casual players didn't get the game either. But there were some who got really into the game. And like one of the players played for 1.5 hours of the game. and she was clearly, really, the experience didn't hold. It lasted for about 20 minutes. So 1.5 hours of broken game. It was painful to watch even, but also somewhat fascinating because we clearly saw that there is something here. Then when we continued asking these people, we continued asking questions, like basically figuring out whether this is a fit for this audience, this casual segment to begin with. And we learned that these people, they liked the mechanical side of the game, but from the team perspective, it was not for them. So when we asked who is this game, for example, they started guessing. No one said that this is for me, but they always said some other audience, children or stay-home moms, or there were all kind of explanations for who is this for. So then we realized that mechanically we are onto something, but it should be for casual audience. But even for casual audience, the theme and the premise of the game is off. We have to do something about that. And then we had been testing with Playtest Cloud already, so then we figured that because for casual audience has certain traits. So because we wanted to make a game for casual audience, oftentimes casual players, they like a story for the context of the game. So then we thought that we have to start testing for the premise and theme of the game. And that's what we did using Playtest Cloud. And we had, so this is maybe the graveyard of prototypes for us. So we had all kind of themes and premises that we tested. And most of them didn't work at all. The audience, they didn't enjoy those. But then there was one that was made a really clear difference. And that was the premise that became then Merge Mansion. So that resonated really well with the audience. Back then we thought that we are smart about testing. Turns out that we were more lucky than smart. But nevertheless, we found a theme and a premise that resonated really well with the audience. Then once we had that in early fall, it was in August or September 2018, then we refactored the playable game that we had. We refactored that on top of the mansion theme, and then we again tested that. So we had the first session in the game, and we tested that by using Playtest Cloud. And that time we got really great feedback from the audience. So we tested it on casual audience and they really loved it. We also did test on the mid-core audience and they also liked it. So it seemed to be really a great fit for these audiences. So that's how Merge Mansion got started. Then we knew that now we have something that we can work on, and we started working on the real game, which then was released in September 2020.
Yes, 2 years after, since the moment of like really early concept.
Yes,
phase.
basically 2 years.
Yeah.
Yes.
So some points of reflection, and this is where I put my product manager hat, because this is really interesting in the process. Because at the time, Merge Dragon and all the Merge Magic, they were staying around the same theme, the complexity, and it's true that no one was thinking, oh, it's a casual audience, or it could be casualized. It was so complex to play. So what I see from the process, as you have tried to first iterate on the mechanic to make it a bit more accessible. Still on the mid-core audience, maybe there was a discovery process to find out that maybe there was a better fit with the casual audience. And then in a very also testing approach, because you presented several themes, and also on a platform that was less scientific, because Playtest Cloud is also a selected audience, right? So
yes.
it's the best you can do at that time, I guess, when you don't go out on the market, and then found like the best themes to make the match. And when I think I saw the same story with Gardenscape, which was the hybridity and the match of two concepts together that were kind of odd, a puzzle, and then the narrative and progress. This is where I see the same. Like there's an innovation part with the merge mechanic to simplify it, but then finding a good theme and loop, and all of those together, what made the game quite unique. And I remember with my casual team at the time when we were discovering the game, like, who is this team? Where is that coming from? That was very fresh to see, and it's great to hear the backstory, which is more discovery, testing process in the dark, and iterating, filtering, and then putting it together, more than okay, we had a whole plan and we knew this thing would work, which is rarely the case, right? So it's more of a testing approach, iterating, and then launching that is led to what Ismerch mentioned.
Yes. I mentioned that I'm really like entrepreneurial myself. And there are all these talk about product market fit in startups and discovering the product market fit through the audience. So this is what the approach that we wanted to also bring to games, because I think it makes a lot of sense. I do think that there are these visionaries who have great ideas for products or games, and who can then implement them and they just work. But I'm not that kind of person, and I really believe in the discovery path. So having an idea to begin with, but then not getting stuck on the idea, but being able to navigate the space of creativity and be able to find something that really suits the audience and serves the audience well.
Yeah, and I can see as well here where when you're not attached exactly to do a certain type of games or a certain direction, you're quite open to move it to because you say like HTML5, smartwatch games, and then merge mid-core, then casual. So you have to be flexible. That's why it's also an advantage in that sense to not be too attached with the what, but more the process, the how, and discovering and adapting to the direction where it takes you, right? So that's super interesting. And I could ask way more questions about merge mention, but maybe here in the journey, as you started to have traction with, so there's, I think, an interesting conversation in parallel to make with when you start to have development of a game. Something like you said you found is I have had Metacore where you're in a mine and you tap on every corner to find something that looks a bit like a gold or a gem. What was the evolution during those 2 years, so end of 2018 to 2020? Not only on the game but on the team and company, right? Because at that time I believe you were maybe lean, small, trying to figure out what will be the core of your company. So how from merge mention Metacore became what Metacore is today?
It's excuse me. It's an excellent question, and well, there are a lot of learnings there. So when we were approaching the launch of Merge Mansion, so we locked down the global launch date for Merge Mansion in early 2020. Then of course the pandemic started in March 2020, and then we weren't sure whether we can launch the game in the first place, what happens in the world overall. We learned that we can actually also work remotely. There were learnings based on this from this as well. And then when the September was closing on, we were able to launch the game. So we were ready for global launch. Back then, we still thought that we can operate the game with a small team. We thought that the game is really different than what it turned out to be in the end. We didn't really understand the story of grandma in the game at that stage. We didn't understand the role that the story plays in the game. We didn't understand the role of really advertising at that stage yet. So of course we thought that we would be doing UA, but we didn't yet know the extent that we will be going over the years. But we did understand, so we thought that we can keep the company a lot smaller, but we did understand that we have to start hiring more people because there are all these roles that we have to fill in. And even though we didn't know that we would grow as big as we are today, we did know that there will be a lot of growth because we were about 15 people back then.
Team size.
Yes, indeed. And we thought that we knew that it's really easy to end up having a lot of growing pains as a company. And we wanted to get certain things right to begin with. One thing was culture. And when it comes to culture, I have had my own learnings from culture and own experiences. The first ones that really made an impact on me, maybe not in the most positive sense, were from Digital Chocolate, so dating 20 years back. And back then, Digital Chocolate was a company that cared a lot for culture. But back in those days, the way companies cared for culture is that we defined the cultures. We oftentimes used keywords, excellence or integrity or ownership. And then we spent a bit of time on expanding on those, what do they mean, but not a lot. But I think that the biggest issue with culture was that it was more selecting things that sound nice and that we really all want to believe in, but then maybe not having that grounded in the company culture, in the practicalities. So I realized that culture is really important, but I didn't really feel it back then. So I felt maybe a bit puzzled. And then I just thought that maybe culture doesn't really even work in this way. But then later on, there were great examples of cultures, like the Netflix culture deck that started spreading from 2009 onwards. That was really inspirational. I didn't feel like it would be a culture that I would want to be working in myself, but it still felt inspirational. And I think it was a great sign of doing culture in a better way. And then there was the Valve handbook for new employees. I think it was 2014. And again, I wouldn't want to be working in that kind of environment, but again, I felt inspired about that. And then there have been others since then, Supercell's culture memo and such. So we thought, when in 2020, when we saw that we have to start growing the company, we also wanted to have our culture in writing, because we thought that it's really important to have this written down. At the same time, we also somehow understood that culture is not, it's not static. It's not that you implement or write it down once and then that's it, but because we are still changing, we are learning as we go, and the environment is changing, culture has to change as well. It has to adapt. So there are some things that are more or less static, like the base values, but then there are many things, other things that have to be more flexible. And when we started creating our first culture agreement, we stated that out loud. We said that we don't understand much about this yet, but this is what we believe in. And it turned out to be a really great way in the end. And we have been iterating on the culture. Originally, the idea was that we revisit the culture together as a company twice per year. It was completely unrealistic. We were able to do it once in 1.5 years' time. And now the idea is that maybe we could do it once per year, hopefully moving forward. But we have done a couple of iterations of it. But I think the culture part we got well. Probably not in the perfect way, but well anyway. So that it's helped us to actually grow the company, have less growing pains. The other good thing, that the other right decision that we did, in my opinion, was that we put a lot of focus on hiring. And this goes back to, I think it was maybe 2018 or 19, somewhere around there. When I noticed that when I was speaking with people from Supercell, I started paying attention to how many internal recruiters they have. And there were so many that I started counting. I was amazed that these are also internal recruiters. And I think, if I remember right, I think I concluded that about 5% of the headcount are internal recruiters. And then I thought that if this is for Supercell, with all their brand, with all their great games and their great culture, if it takes this much work for them to hire people, it must be really hard for someone like us, for example, without any track record or without any name. So when we started in 2020, when we started looking for people lead for the company, we wanted to find one with background in recruiting, because I have done my fair share of recruiting, but I realized that I know nothing about recruiting really in the end. So we need to find someone who comes with experience in recruiting, so that we focus on the right things. And I think that was the right decision to do to begin with. And we also started building our own talent acquisition team at about that time. And I think now I understand better the role of talent acquisition team, for example, in the company. It plays a crucial role. It's really important that you have the internal team, that these people are the right ones for the company to begin with. And they are maybe the most important part of the company at the growth stage. So I believe that because of these two decisions we did, the growth has been easier than it would have been otherwise.
Yeah, and for the reminder, indeed you grew from those 15 to almost 200 people within 2 years, right?
Yes, so we have basically doubled the headcount like year after year, pretty much. So, for example, in the beginning of this year, we were 100 people, and we will be 200 before the end of the year.
Yes.
And then we were 50 in the beginning of 21, and doubled to 100 in the end.
And let's take a moment to pause on those two parts that you shared. It's quite important because there's, I don't know if it's a debate, but some startups think it's important to start, with clarity on the culture, especially when you build a company with people you haven't worked with. But I understand you have history where you've worked with a co-founder, so I guess you were the culture, although it was maybe not that explicit, but totally a must-do when you need to grow, because how can you even explain or select who is right for you at this phase and with the mission, right? So, and then the other part on hiring, which I've seen also more allocation resource sometimes debate, like putting the minimum of people in their hiring. And this is where indeed it could be quite a strategic mistake when you need to grow effectively, right? You can grow quickly, but then you have a pain point, as you mentioned, like later when you're too big with inconsistency that is hard to correct. And a follow-up question I had on that time when you had awareness, you need to grow and you need to put into words, into more practicalities your culture. How long did that process take to even write that book? I saw you presented some pages of it at the IGDA Leadership Day. Who was leading? Was it led by the group, or was a clear owner, and should that be the CEO? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so in our case, yes, the CEO was the owner of that. But of course, we interviewed everybody. And we were a lot smaller team back then, so it was still possible to really discuss it through and see what are the important things that people feel in this company. And the first version of that, it actually came quite easily because we were such a small team. And I would say that from cultural point of view, we probably were also quite homogeneous in that sense. So we were really aligned already to begin with. And I think that alignment to begin with is important. Oftentimes when you found companies, like even among the co-founders, like oftentimes there are some co-founders who feel that actually this is not for me. So that's the period that you find alignment among these people. But it really is important to find it. I think games industry is one of the places where people actually find alignment more easily because it's a clear, like compared to startups, because it's clear what we are trying to aim for. We want to be making like great games, successful games. There might be differences about the audiences or what kind of games we want to be making, but nevertheless there is some alignment to begin with. People are really driven to be making these games. So I think that's a really good thing. And so involving people in the beginning to begin with, because you really want to have the culture to be something tangible and you really have to live it as well. So it's not that you just write it down and that it's all aspirational, but you have to live it as well. And in our case, the iterations that we have been doing on the culture agreement, we still have the first one available, so anyone can go and read it. And there, many of the things, like you can see that what we have learned. For example, in the first one, we talked about small independent teams. So we still believed, we looked up towards Supercell and we thought that we can keep our teams small and lean like Supercell does. And then we tried doing that, it didn't work out. We failed. And then we just concluded that for some reason Supercell can do that. Maybe they just have, the people are happy working for so long together. Maybe they are just more experienced. Maybe they are some super talent because they are Supercell, that maybe we are not like them. And we concluded that we just have to accept it, that we have to start scaling the team. So then when we got back to the culture agreement and we looked at the small independent teams, so it was clear that small, well, we won't be small anymore. We have to have bigger teams, so we have to drop small. But then we started discussing, what does independent mean? What's the context for that? And then we realized that what we mean by independent is that we talk about basically autonomy. And what does autonomy mean in the context of our culture then? Then we got to defining ownership, defining responsibilities well, and giving autonomy to people. And these discussions came really naturally, like through the iteration of the process. This year we did a culture workshop, so we were about 150 people at the time. We had an offsite focusing on culture, and we did a workshop as a company, like how should we evolve our culture now? and we got really great feedback. Now we are in the process of writing the next iteration of the culture agreement. Let's see how it goes, but I feel like this is at least we have the right elements for the process to be iterating on the culture moving forward as well.
And this is already great, actionable for the listeners here, because a culture book is evolving and it's very context-based, right? At the time you wrote it, it was also with the 15 people who brought it so far, and it made sense in the context. What I really like about it as well, it's a conversation, right? Because it's at this point, it doesn't start just with the co-founders, you're already a team, so it's made of the people who are part of the team and taking that input. I believe it's a conversation, and you try to keep the same process at different stages and scale, right? So much more difficult, of course, with 150 people, but making it as a theme itself, so it's like you highlight the importance of it off-site, but also you open the conversation, hey, we are updating, reflecting the reality of how we work today, or more aspirational, where do we want to be, and getting the input of people, because this is really important. Where I've seen also the practice sometimes is so disconnected, and it's the desire from the top, but it's, like you said, words, and sometimes it's not even actions that the leaders can follow through, unfortunately. And also it's not reflecting as well the team's presence. So it's a very hard exercise to make sure that you reflect at the same time where the people today, who you are today, as well as the leadership of the company, but also looking forward, where do we aspire to be as we grow, right? It's a movement, so I think it's almost like a whole skill in itself, defining culture at different stages, a year and a half, which I think is already good. Sometimes it's like never. So it's already good at that size, but also what is the process to making it right accurately and making it evolve?
Yes, I agree. And there are so many examples, like learnings for me from this process. Like one example, in addition to the small independent teams, another example was that the first version was really focused on games and making games, because we were basically all making games back then. But then feedback we started getting was that it doesn't feel inclusive because I'm not in the game teams. So it sounds so basic, but there have been many eye-opening moments of seeing that this is actually, it doesn't reflect us as a company anymore and our culture, because it's been a subset of things.
Yeah.
And then also like within that subset, so you have to be able to see like what to change in there that you have. Maybe you have to add something or remove something or change something. But then also, what is the bigger context that we are in at the moment? Like we are not the same company that we used to be. So what's changed? And the best way to do that is to listen to your people.
Yeah. And maybe this is like the part for, as you are in the part of, I look at it like from really the startup day to growing up, but still growing up. Like, as you said, I think from our conversation, I still believe we are a maturing industry. There's so many steps still to go before we can call ourselves grown up. And where are you in your journey as a company? As I see as well, so you have a big success with Merge Mention. I believe also quite a good financial security, for the future of employees, and a good place to be. But I see also there's some form of expansion with a new studio that you announced in Berlin, and also there's been some form of acquisition or growing, like you took also the operations of Everdell, and then Piñata was announced a bit earlier, a few months ago. And I wonder as well for you, and you have also new game section. So where is Metacore going? Like it started from a game, and more of a almost like purpose that is manifesting of the company. And we talked about this, there's themes around the inclusivity, giving back to the gaming community. And I'm sure those aspirations will emerge more as you have, reached the first layer of pure survival, success, and now expanding. So if you could tell more also about that and your future aspiration with Metacore.
Yes. So with our goal has been to be building a portfolio of games from the beginning. So Merge Mansion was the first one, but we have had at least one team working on finding a market fit for another game. And that's the mission that we are on still. So we have a Merge Mansion that we are still growing and scaling. Merge Mansion team is 100 plus people at the moment. We believe that we could, let's say fairly easily double the team size. And we would still, like looking at the output of the team, and the need for content from players, I think there wouldn't be any extra. So we would still be serving the audience, maybe not in a perfect way, a lot better, but maybe not in a perfect way. So there's still room for growth in Merge Mansion, but then also looking for how are we able to find new market fits. And like we started working on Merge Mansion, we started by testing, we started from the audience. We didn't realize how lucky we were to find a concept that resonated so well with the audience. And now we are putting a lot more effort and focus into testing and finding something that works. We are doing it from ground up in many cases. Everdale is a case of us seeing great traction. We saw that in our view, Supercell found partial market fit for Everdale. They were really onto a gem itself, but they were not able to really polish it, really dig deep into it. And that's what we are trying to do. So we took the game into parts and then we started putting it together in different ways. At the same time testing, like where is the market fit? And that's where we are with that game still. And then we have 2 other teams working on 2 other new concepts. And the basic idea is that we start from an audience and we start testing. We start to understand, form an idea of whether there's a need for this kind of game in the market out there. When it comes to expanding to Berlin, so talent is our biggest bottleneck at the moment. So there are 2 axes basically. So it's kind of like amount of talent, but also then talent in specific disciplines. It's like data being one. Data is a big bottleneck. We need a lot more people to analyze the data we have to form understanding of audiences, product managers, producers. There are various roles that are more or less a bigger bottleneck for us. And we are expanding to Berlin to tap into the talent pool over there. But then also when we are talking about relocation, so we have been relocating many people to Helsinki to begin with. Now we can offer 2 locations, so either Berlin or Helsinki to relocate to. So I'm hoping that we are able to scale faster with this expansion.
And my last question is more like on a retrospective of. So it's very exciting, by the way, as you expand, and I think like we'll touch more. I think on that in future maybe events, where there's another part that is more visible through what you do is expansion of community, and we probably see more of that in the future in Berlin as well, and a lot already is done in Helsinki. And there's the other side of the scaling, as there are things that you have put in place to minimize, I would say, all the pain points at scaling. But looking back as well, I see some challenges always with scale, which is about around the communication. So indeed, as the bigger you grow, the slower to make movement and change, if there are changes that need to happen. It's also a scaling of the skills. So what are the challenges you have also in terms of scaling of skills and even leadership, right? So probably leveling up everyone as you need to grow. If you could talk more also about those pain points of scaling, which are, I guess, inevitable.
Yes, they are inevitable. Maybe just a short word about the community. So yes. So the Finnish games community, there's a really strong community and alignment within Finnish games community. And this is something that, coming from this community, it took a while to understand that we are not like other communities. So we really have in a way, our goals are aligned. Even though we are from different companies, we are not seeing each other as competitors, but it's more like our goals are aligned. And I'm actually seeing quite a bit of this, the same in games industry overall. So I think there is a great basis for building more stronger communities in different talent hubs. So then when it comes to the community, we also want to we talk about giving back. Part of it is that we are part of this community here and we want to give back because we have been getting so much from it. But also the other thing is that it's also good for the company longer term. So the bigger and stronger the community is here, the better off we are as well. So I hope that there would be 5 big companies in Finland, companies like Supercell, Rovio, and so forth. And then all the small companies as well, because then that would create a great basis for talent to relocate to here as well. So they wouldn't only come to Metacore, for example, but they would become part of this community. So that's the thing about that. But that's a whole different story. I could talk about this for a long time. But then about talent. So I think one thing is that we need more talent, but we already have talent in-house. how do we make sure that everybody is growing themselves as well, their skills, be it more at being a great programmer or artist, or then being a great leader to begin with. We have to give people tools to really be able to do that. And I think we are really only getting started on this. So we began, the idea was that like we want everybody to be proactively developing their skills, but then we didn't give enough guidance on how to actually do that. And now we are in the process of fixing that. We have our own training programs. We have different mentors and coaches that you can engage with, and all of that. We have also been working on defining, for example, what does it mean to be a supervisor at Metacore in our culture, and really crystallizing that, doing trainings on that, and so forth. So, and I think we are far from perfect on this, so there's still a lot of work to be done. We are only scratching the surface so far. But I think it's really easy to underestimate the need to really grow your people as well, to put a lot of focus in that.
Yeah, and that's something I really appreciated again when I saw your thoughts about growing exactly the leadership level, so extending it, and also especially when it comes to culture, how you scale a culture. It's not anymore with one person, and you can also apply it, distribute it over 100 people, but it's through different people who are influencing others. And that doesn't necessarily mean only the leaders, but then this is where the opportunities as you level up many, and in the way, because culture is translated in decision-making, leading, influencing, and so on, building the right system, the resources, the support to grow, internal leaders. So it's great to hear you have mentoring, coach, also defining, crystallizing what is a supervisor. Because a lot of those are implicit definition, and you can make your own definition and act in a very inconsistent way that what is maybe expected of you at Metacore with your own vision, right? So it's great to hear that first you think about it, you're starting about it, and through the same process you learn, you correct, calibrate, and that's it in the end.
Yes, and I think it comes down to really growth mindset. Me, myself, I learned so much in the past 3 years. It feels even embarrassing to think about myself 3 years ago, because there have been so many learnings about even really basic things. But I guess that's what life is about in the end.
You have to enjoy the process as well.
Indeed.
But that's the beauty of it. And at last, is there something that I didn't ask for all? We touched on a lot of things that I wish I could ask you more, but at least for today and our listeners to just understand as well the real backstory of Metacore. Is there something I didn't ask that I should have asked you today that you'd like to talk about at last?
I think we covered a lot of things. There are so many things that I'm really talking about. I think we covered the most important parts. Culture, I think the role of talent acquisition to begin with. I think the industry being immature, we are really young as an industry. I think as long as there are people in the industry like I am, like I'm self-taught, I'm really I was interested in the craft of making games to begin with. As long as I'm in the industry, we can't call this mature industry to begin with. And I think if you look at other industries to compare to, so I don't accept that. I think I see a really bright future for games industry. And I think that would be a great topic to talk about, but maybe for the next session then.
Yeah, and we will have some form of collaboration around that, around the community, elevating the industry and growing up together, because I do see the same and I agree. And I don't think it has anything also to do with the fact that we are not experts in making games. It's an evolving field. What is entertainment? It evolves with humans, and we evolve as society and global society. So the only, I would say, path forward is adapting. So it's the ability to learn, but we can't be experts at what we do forever, because things are just changing fast, especially in games.
Yes, I agree. And I think it's clear, but maybe worth saying out loud as well, that when we talk about games, we have to be inspired. If we are not inspired, we can't do creative work. But the same comes down to talking about building companies or creating cultures or whatever. We have to have inspiration, draw inspiration from others, be it more experienced people in the industry or maybe people from other industries or whatever. But we have to draw inspiration from others to really be able to grow. And I think that we can only do together.
Yeah. And thanks again just for the time you made today and for that message. And I can tell you there are so many other entrepreneurs that resonate and founders and companies that resonate with the same belief that we will grow bigger as a group rather than individually, whether as a company or as a person. So thanks for bringing the message, and with influence, with what you've built with the company, you do have also the influence to inspire others as well to do the same.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Mika, for your time. All right, everyone, that's it for today. Wrapping up. Thank you, Mika.